Hello, everyone. Welcome to the crossover of traditional sports and esports session. My name is Eric Jackson, sports business reporter at Sportico. I'll be joined by some of the decision makers who work together to bring competitive gaming and sports as we know it. We have Shannon Gross, social media strategist for the Dallas Cowboys, Kim Miale, NFL agent and general counsel for Rock Nation Sports, Kilay, Reinfeld, president of Paradigm Sports Management, and we have Justin Kenna, CEO of GameSquare Esports. Thank you all for coming on. There's been this wave of esports properties and organizations becoming more visible and active in the space. Previously reserved, right, for sports teams and, their partners themselves. I just kind of want to start off with the big why, guys. Why are traditional sports franchises and leagues making these hefty investments, right, in these partnerships into esports and gaming?
Yeah, I can kick off if you want, and then probably throw it over to Shannon. I think Shannon's probably lived this experience the most with Jerry Jones, obviously investing in this space. Jerry being pretty early on investing into complexity gaming a number of years ago. I think nearly 4 years ago now. It's kind of the Wayne Gretzky quote in terms of don't skate to where the puck is, skate to where it's going. If you look at the growth over the past few years, it speaks for itself. 81% of Gen Zers play video games, 77% of millennials do. Gaming as a whole is the fastest growing entertainment industry in the world, and esports is a part of that. So esports is obviously the professional competitive part of that. And I think if you just look at these huge audience numbers alone, Yuzu actually came out with some numbers that 13 to 39-year-olds, there's 20% of those that watch competitive sports every week. And that's just a small part of this overall industry. But of that 20%, 32% actually prefer to watch esports over traditional sports. So that is in a really powerful sort of demographic and market. So I think it's really about being able to look at ways to integrate the two and engage an audience in the space. But I'll throw it over to Shannon because he's sort of firsthand lived this.
Yeah, I think there's just some natural synergies with esports and traditional sports, and it's a new generation that's I think we all gamed growing up, but now that you've got competitive gaming, we all wish when we were growing up there was competitive gaming because we might have taken different career paths along the way, right? But now it's a legitimate sport, and I think the way that traditional sports teams are looking at it now, especially us, is it's an untapped fan base that may not be interested in traditional sports, that we have the opportunity to expose them to football where previously they may not have even been interested in football. But if some of our players play some games that they're interested in and there's some crossover there, you kind of cross-pollinate, you get somebody involved on this end that may not traditionally have been involved, and vice versa. By Mr. Jones, owning a part of complexity, and being in that world, you may expose some football traditional sports fans over to the esports world, and there's room for both. I think there's enough, there's enough hours in the day, the week, the month where it works for both. So it's kind of a best of both worlds where you're cross-pollinating fan bases, and especially now that guys are coming into the league and they've been gaming, and some of them are good enough to do it on a professional level. And we're starting to see a lot of that with some of the stuff that, GSN's doing and things like that across other leagues and other sports. So I think it just makes a lot of sense on a lot of different levels.
Kim, I'm curious your perspective coming from the agency.
Sure. So from my perspective, pretty much across the board, all of my football clients are gamers. In their free time, that's what they like to do. That's how they decompress, whether they're on the road or at home. So for me, to give them an opportunity to use that as a way to monetize themselves and also engage with a different fan base, which a little like Shannon was talking about, just traditional football fans may not be esports fans or vice versa. So to tap into that fan base of esports players and fans to help our clients just have a broader range of reach, then that's a great thing. And if they can make money playing in a tournament or with a brand that wouldn't traditionally be supporting a football player, again, that's a great thing. And it's a great service for our agency to provide because it's completely, to this point, out of the box. It's usually the traditional endorsement deals with shoe brands, headphones, things of that nature. So now if we can get into an entirely different space and open up new opportunities to make money, do endorsements, brand themselves, that's music to my ears as an agent.
Yeah, and you know, I have a question to where it's, you know, I want to ask you guys, how far can you push the boundary of traditional sports without hurting the product, right? So it's like, one would think you have the new offering for fans that could eventually draw attention away from the traditional product, right? The live game action. How do you guys just think of like weighing those two?
I'll jump in on this one. I don't know if they really hurt each other at all. I think the opposite. I think they feed each other quite a bit and quite well. Like Kim was saying, for us, it's very similar and in some aspects even more important because we're in MMA, we're considered a blood sport, as they call it, right? So there's a lot of brands who obviously have issues in some cases with what happens inside the cage or the octagon. And I think that the athletes are going to play regardless, and it does allow them to connect to their fan in a whole new way. And it allows the fan who would watch the fight or would watch the football game or would watch the basketball game, they're not going to stop watching that, right? They're going to continue to be a fan. They're going to continue to watch their sports. This is just a new way of taking in content that they want, right? I think we all want that new feed, that additional sort of interview into what their world might be. And when you get to see them playing video games and talking and interacting, it's a new way to look at that athlete. And I think fans really enjoy that, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree totally with Kilay. I don't think that it hurts traditional sport. I mean, the reality is that, you know, there are huge numbers that are watching gaming, watching esports. And I think, you know, traditional sports and owners like Jerry, as we talked about, have identified that. And, you know, instead of seeing that as a threat, have embraced that. I think that's the right approach. It's really about this kind of integration and ways of, you know, looking to integrate the two. And I think that's definitely, you know, at GameSquare, something that we really focus on is that intersection between, you know, sports and gaming and esports. And to kind of Kim's point before, I think with Rock Nation and our partnership there, it's really interesting that this is actually a way for fans to engage and get to know athletes. You know, often athletes are performing, especially if you look at a sport like the NFL, they've got a helmet on, they're playing on a Sunday, unless they have, you know, they're a quarterback or they're a superstar and they've had a huge game and they're getting a lot of media, you really don't get an opportunity to necessarily engage with those athletes as much. And gaming's a really good way of doing that. I mean, you know, we've had a few tournaments lately where we've had with professional athletes who are really great gamers and, you know, had a lot of fun with those, but it's been a really good way. I think Leonard Fournette's a really good example. Kim, who's obviously a client of Kim's, you know, Lenny's got a great personality and you know, integrating him into some of these opportunities and tournaments has been a great way to show that to fans. So it's a great way for fans to actually, you know, really engage with these athletes.
I'll add, sorry, Kim, just one more thing I'll add. In your world, Kim, I mean, in football, you don't get to see the athlete too.
Right.
So in gaming, that really brings them to life. It lets you see their face. It lets you interact that way.
Yeah, I mean, like Justin just said about Leonard Fournette, has a huge personality. He's hilarious. He's super competitive. I mean, you can't really convey that necessarily on the football field. The competitiveness, yes, but his humor, no. So given this opportunity to engage with fans by playing esports, you know, it's created a different way of showcasing who Leonard is off the field, and people are learning more about him than otherwise would just through football.
Yeah, well, as far as athletes go, you know, is this something they're doing organically, you would say, Kim, or is this more of an opportunity to monetize it, or, you know, how do you kind of look at that?
It started very organically. Again, most of my clients game as a way to decompress. They find it relaxing. So they bring their gaming systems on the road with them. They bring them in the off season when they're training. I think that they just genuinely enjoy it. And now to take what was just a hobby basically and use it to, expand their platforms, make some more money, expand the fan base. It's a win-win for everybody.
With the explosion of NIL in the college sports space, how are you all seeing streaming gaming becoming a larger part of, your organizations and agencies?
I know for me, when we go out and pitch to college players for NIL, we've been pitching this partnership that we have with Justin's company because it's something that a lot of agencies aren't providing. And again, across the board, the college players are just as interested, if not more so, in gaming, because I find the younger the client base, the bigger the gamer that they are. So it's just an added value for me to bring to the table to say, hey, we've got this esports department where you can actually monetize what you love to do when you're not playing football, which is gaming. And then it gives us an opportunity to brand you in that space as well.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, you look at the top 10 draft picks in every sport, right? And it's going to happen more and more every year moving forward. The agency world is pretty competitive in recruiting these athletes. I think for Rock Nation, like, what a step ahead that you have an agency there that can actually help, build content strategy, grow audience, monetize a space that, you're really interested in as a hobby. It really is. You look at these young athletes now and they really get it. I'm actually here in Vegas this weekend to spend some time with Sean O'Malley, who's fighting tomorrow night at the UFC. He's a really good example. I mean, if you have a look at some of the content he creates on YouTube, on Twitch, he gets it. He's actually monetizing. He's creating a brand and a new audience and monetizing. He's a really good example, but that's one of many. I think it's a really organic thing. These athletes, are gamers and they really enjoy it. I think if we can give them an avenue to grow a greater audience and to monetize, then that's hugely positive.
Yeah. Would you say if you're an owner of a sports team, pro sports team, today, if you're not invested in esports or gaming, would you just say you're behind at this point, going into 22?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends, right? I don't think you necessarily have to own an esports team, but I think you need to be invested in it in the way of understanding that, there are a multitude of ways within this industry to reach audience and engage and use traditional sports to integrate. And if you're not looking at ways to do that, then absolutely, I think you're behind. This doesn't have to necessarily be I own an esports team and we're competing in Counter-Strike or Call of Duty and we're going to build the biggest and best team in the world because, as many people, who look under the hood, many of these pure esports orgs are actually still burning a fair bit of money. I think there's a lot of future upside in that, in valuation and beyond. But the gaming industry as a whole, I mean, it really is about content. I think Kilay said it really well before. Content is king here, and this is a whole new avenue around content that can engage with a younger fan base. So from a traditional sports perspective, and again, kind of not to put Shannon on the spot, but to throw over to Shannon, I mean, this is the world that he lives in. I mean, if you're not looking from a traditional sports viewpoint at creating compelling content in space, I think you're a long way behind.
Yeah, I think from a pro team standpoint, you're always looking for your next generation of, season ticket holder, your next generation of merch buyer. And, a lot of we talked about earlier, your traditional sports fans and kids that were playing traditional sports, now they're watching others play video games. They're watching people play Call of Duty and Madden, and they're just as content watching them play these games as, my generation was watching baseball and football and basketball on TV. So if you're like Justin said, if you're not, you don't have to own an esports team, but if you're not thinking about how to engage what's going on, because this is a new sport, this will be one of the biggest sports across, and it's global. It's not just US based or Europe based. It's a global sport. If you're not thinking about how to tap into that and how to, at least expose your sport to that generation and what they're doing, then I think, yeah, you absolutely are behind. And I think that's kind of what you don't want to convert them. You just want to expose them, I think, and show them like, hey, this is what else is out there. So I think you definitely need to be thinking that direction if you already aren't. And if you aren't already thinking that way, you're a little bit behind. So yes.
What ways can we expect the line between esports and traditional sports to continue to thin? Is it VR or what other avenues come to mind?
You know, I'll jump in real quick just from me, you know, running social media at the Cowboys and kind of I think what's traditionally been esports is changing. And I think because now you can see with what's happening in that space, these are content creators now. They're not just playing games. The thing, like Kilay said earlier, content is king, right? We're in the content business. Athletes are in the content business. Teams are in the content business. Gamers are now in the content business. They're becoming personalities just like, you know, athletes have personalities. So I think where you're going to see the lines blur, at least as far as, you know, the lens that I look at it through, is creating content together. And, you know, you're going to have teams that create, like us, we're in a great situation with Complexity and, you know, GSN, where we have access to, you know, gaming athletes. So there's going to be a lot of co-mingling with our personalities, their on-air personalities, and a lot of co-content creation. So from my point of view, it's creating content that we can get in front of their audience, and then content where we can get them in front of our audience. And then to me, at some point, there will be just this one big blur where it all kind of runs together and it's one big happy family, and we're really co-mingled and kind of part of each other's fiber.
Yeah, I totally agree with Shannon. I think people talk about this industry and even the kind of growth of traditional sports into gaming as something that's, you know, kind of matured, or, you know, when does it fall away? We are in such an early stage with the growth of this and of the integration into traditional sports. It's such an early state. So we're going to continue to see it grow. We're going to continue to see, you know, game day activations. We're going to see tournaments hosted and played by, you know, major sporting teams. We're going to see gaming lounges at sporting, you know, arenas and all of those things. But it's really early days. So there's a huge evolution still to take place there. And to Shannon's point, I think the crossover is real, but there's still so much opportunity for real collaboration. I think, you know, we did an AT&T content piece at AT&T Stadium with Tim the Tap Man, who's one of the biggest gamers through my org at Complexity, with Ezekiel Elliott. And they were competing, playing video games on, you know, the massive screen at AT&T Stadium. And like, what an incredible moment. But there really are, you know, only a handful of those types of examples. So I think we'll start to see those become a little more mainstream. I think there's a huge amount of growth in that crossover of, you know, not just about, hey, how do the Cowboys integrate gaming into, you know, their ordinary course of business, but how do we cross collaborate our athletes and creators, as Shannon really, you know, said there.
I think you're gonna, just to answer a little further, I think you're gonna see VR. I think you're gonna see AR. I think in the NFTs and the whole sort of crypto and NFT community coming, that word I just said in the end, I think is really what it comes down to, is these communities that are being built and created around an athlete, around an esports player. And how do you bring those communities together to sort of build a stronger community and a more tight-knit group of people who all have the same passions and love all the same stuff, and all they want is, again, more content. But how do they take that content together, I think is this next phase that we're going to see. How do we do it together, especially with COVID and everything happened? It kind of ripped everyone apart. Everyone really wants to be together again somehow. And I think these technologies are allowing for that.
As we know, to get into these, to take advantage of these communities, it takes investment. I wanted to ask you all, how do you quantify return on investment? Is it, what are the long-term and short-term revenue streams?
Yeah, so they vary probably across the group here for sure. From an esports org perspective, if you're running an esports org, your kind of financial models, pretty akin to a traditional sporting financial model, right? You have prize money and you're competing to win and bring in your major revenues through that. You have obviously your traditional sponsorships on jerseys, naming rights, events, tournaments, so forth. But I think building out, we keep going back to content because gaming really is so much bigger than just esports. I think the opportunity for these content creators and streamers to really build large audience, engaged audience, to then be able to monetize and integrate brands through those content opportunities. That's really the key for an org in this space anyway. But what I'd say is, and you can even see this if you look at it from even just an investment thesis standpoint. This is less reliant today on being profitable or just a pure P&L standpoint. This is really about engaging these future fans, right? These fans of the future, and we're continuing to see these numbers increase. So I think you can also quantify by audience, by brand growth and engagement. But I think for all four of us on this Zoom are probably different metrics as to what makes gaming and esports investment successful.
Shannon, you have any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I think did you say Shannon or Kim? I'll jump in anyway. Doesn't matter.
No, jump in, Shannon.
I think Kim could go. I think honestly, I think we're just scratching the surface as far as like revenue streams. A couple that jump out to me are, I think you're going to see pro teams come up with some type of gaming leagues where, you sponsor tournaments, you have gaming tournaments, and you build kind of a database, kind of a gaming league. And then, long term, I think there's a lot of synergies and a lot of new revenue streams with partners that we currently have that we can expose them to a new audience and a new demographic that they don't typically get with, traditional sports. With the Cowboys, it's a younger demographic. It's there's totally, new untapped kind of exposure there. So I think it allows us to cross over into, hey, not only can you do these types of sponsorship deals with the Cowboys, now we have this relationships with an esports org, and we have our own gaming league. And there's, new revenue streams possible there. And then, just the spirit of competition, if you're into sports or you're into esports, you like to compete. So I think in the future, and this is probably a little bit longer term, you're going to see our gaming league competing with the Washington football team's gaming league, because there's already built-in rivalries. And I think there's a lot of exciting things on the horizon that we haven't even begun to explore yet, because there's not enough pro teams, at least in the NFL, that are going down this road yet. But I think long term, you're going to see some instant built-in rivalry stuff where there's competition, which is going to raise even, who knows, there may be, big fan summits of e-gaming at, like what Justin said, at sporting venues in the future, where you have a real life esports tournament going on at the same time you have a football game going on, or a precursor leading up to it. So I think really we just haven't even scratched the surface on as far as the different types of things you can do from additional revenue that doesn't really compete with traditional sports or what we're doing now as a team.
But do you think like this can help drive ticket sales for the Cowboys or merchandise sales, like, or do you think that remains separate, long term? Like, do you think it feeds into each other, or how does that?
I think the biggest way this feeds into that is, what we've kind of all been touching on here is the exposure. Like you may have a kid or even a grown-up that signs up for, we threw kind of a mock Fortnite tournament several weeks ago, just as a test run, and had a play-by-play and all that. There's a definite scenario where you integrate on-air personalities that are Cowboys personalities or Cowboys players into these tournaments that may not even be playing in the tournament, but they're on air during the event. And, people that are watching this, they're like, what, that Ezekiel Elliott's a really cool dude. I've never watched football before, but I might start watching now. And they automatically, because he was part of something they're interested in, if they're going to buy a jersey, they're going to go buy that guy's jersey. If they're going to watch a football game, they're going to go watch the Cowboys because Zeke piqued their interest. If they stumble across Leonard Fournette's, live stream on YouTube or wherever he's at, and they see him and he's a funny guy, guess what? They're going to go watch his football game. They're going to get interested just because they like him as a person. And I think that's where the content creation comes apart. That's where in the football world, we always say the helmet off experience is a lot better, because you don't see these guys on the field and you don't know how they are. I think, not directly maybe, but I think indirectly, absolutely it exposes them to that type of that access and that kind of curiosity to get them to take that extra step and learn about football.
Absolutely. And I kind of want to wrap up with this question here. How vital is it for athletes who are gamers to become influencers in the space, to push esports even more mainstream?
I think it's huge for the athletes because they all realize that their playing life is relatively short-lived. And so they want to tee themselves up to be personalities outside of just the sport that they play. So this is one avenue to do that, to showcase who they are as a personality, and to give them something to do, again, the next chapter after the playing career is over. So I think it's a great avenue for our athletes to pursue while they're playing and then for post-playing career as well.
Yeah, and I think in terms of the importance in the space, you touched on it well. I mean, it is important, right? I think in terms of, you saw in COVID, obviously the growth of the gaming industry and esports, particularly within that, was going north, but it was definitely fast-tracked through COVID by this halt in traditional sport. There was no other sport on, so ESPN was headlining esports tournaments. So it wasn't just these endemic brands and media. It was these traditional forms of media covering gaming and esports. And I think the athlete push has really helped commercialize this space. I think it's a really nice space for brands who probably don't. They understand that they need to be have a gaming and esports strategy, but may not understand the real value of a Tim the Tatman or somebody like that. But seeing an Ezekiel Elliott, who's a big gamer, it's a really sort of nice landing spot. It's like a soft landing spot for brands dipping their toe in the water in the industry as well. So I do think it's really important having the backing of key athletes and celebrities in the space and seeing their passion and their authenticity to gaming, which is also really important because these communities can be quite fickle and they'll see through it really easily. So I think it's incredibly important.
I think you guys hit it in the head, Kim, what you said, especially. We try to teach our athletes and educate them all the time that the things outside of the sport that they're passionate about and that they do anyway are the things that they're going to continue to do throughout their lives. Becoming an influencer in those spaces simply opens doors for them. It gives them opportunities that they won't have if they don't do that while they have the spotlight on them playing professional sports. Not to say that esports isn't professional sports, it is, but that's not their core, right? What's really interesting is that it works one way, but not the other. You can't, a football player, a basketball player, MMA fighter, they can play esports. They can stream, they can play video games, they can join tournaments, they can try to professionalize more. But the chances of you having someone who plays video games deciding to go be a football player tomorrow, I would imagine they're pretty slim. So it's a really nice process for the athletes in professional sports to be able to go into the space and promote the space, which only helps them, right? So I think it's really, really important. We try to educate them on this stuff all the time. And that goes across several different areas, right? Like we said before, whether it's NFTs or esports or all sorts of different areas where they can have another life.
Shannon, you're right at the center of it. So I'm curious your thoughts.
Yeah, I really couldn't say it better than anybody else. I think it's a great opportunity for athletes. And I think the unique partnership we have with GSN and Complexity allows us a very unique situation where, when we identify who these guys are, we're set up in the future to, set them up with, a relationship with, the best in the business to know how to do gaming setups. If they're interested in streaming, if they're interested in, creating content, we have right across the street from our facility, Justin and his team to help them, to help them set up whatever they want to do. And I think it's really important for, just like Kilay said, and Kim said it earlier, like I don't think enough athletes think about what's next, especially when they're in the moment, because when you're in the moment, you're invincible. You're going to play football forever. And I think that the lifespan of a football player is about 3 years in the NFL. And you have a short amount of time to grab, like Kilay said, the spotlight while you have it, build your following, build what you're passionate about. And then that carries on for the rest of your life. And I think, as there's more and more guys coming into the league that are interested in gaming, we're going to see more and more of them kind of jump on this train where in the off season, you're building this brand. Football season, you're building your football brand. And a lot of them are going to get a lot more smarter business wise out of it, because I think this is something that they're going to want to do long term. And obviously the shelf life of a gamer is probably a lot longer than it is of a pro athlete. So I think the longevity of that. And also, from the agent side, you guys know this as well as anybody. There's additional revenue streams that are ongoing past football that you can engage in, and that can help you, supplement your career and keep you going through life. So I think, those are kind of from the team side, and just seeing the athlete side. That's how it all kind of makes sense to me. So.
Well, hey, that brings us to the end of the session. You guys heard it here first. If you're not investing or, making strides, being forward thinking when it comes to esports and gaming, you're going to get left behind. So I appreciate you guys coming on today, and thank you for your time.